The first railroads of the United States were not only feats of engineering, they were symbols of a new era, harbingers of progress that cut through untouched forests, deep valleys, and small farming towns. But Pennsylvania, with its endless mountains and iron-rich soil, held a different kind of reputation. By the early 1850s, rail workers would whisper that the new lines running across the Allegheny foothills were not merely crossing land, but something far older. Newspapers avoided the topic altogether. Company officials threatened dismissal for spreading superstitious rumors. And yet, between the winters of 1851 and 1859, a series of strange observations made by engineers, brakemen, and conductors became so frequent that the stories survived in private letters, railroad logs, and coroner reports. The men spoke of figures standing on the tracks at night. Witnesses described them as pale, shadow-thin, unmoving. Engineers swore they pulled the train's whistle and slammed the brakes in panic, only to find the rails empty. No bodies, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. This is the story of those sightings, tied to 5 documented events along several Pennsylvania lines. Events that would later form the basis of one of the most persistent 19th century railroad legends. The Allegheny Pass Incident, February 1851. The Allegheny Portage Railroad was notorious long before the sightings began. The line climbed through the mountains by means of inclined planes, iron cables, and massive steam engines anchoring the system at every summit. On the night of February 14, 1851, Engineer Thomas Walden, a man known for his rigidity and calm temperament, was operating locomotive number 12 as it approached the Gallatin summit. His fireman, Edward McFall, would later recount the event in a written deposition after Walden's death. As they rounded a curve near a wooded embankment, Walden suddenly grabbed the brake lever and shouted, "There's a man on the rails. God help us, he's right there." McFall saw nothing. The headlamp illuminated the track ahead for no more than 100 feet, its beam scattered by heavy snowfall. Walden insisted someone had been standing in the center of the railbed. He described the figure with unusual detail for a moment, lasting only seconds. Tall, thin, wearing a coat too long for his frame. No hat, head turned toward us, pale face, no movement. When they finally halted the locomotive, Walden jumped down and ran ahead with a lantern. McFall followed reluctantly. There were no prints in the snow, not even their own, which the wind covered almost instantly. Walden remained shaken for the rest of the night. 3 days later, he requested reassignment to a lower grade line. Company management refused. 2 weeks later, on February 28th, Walden collapsed in the engine cab during a routine climb. He died before reaching the depot, his heart simply giving out. In his coat pocket was a folded piece of paper. On it, in his neat handwriting, were the words, "I saw him again." This is the first known written record referencing the apparition. Seconds, the Great Conemaugh Wreck, August 1853. Unlike many railroad legends, this event is thoroughly documented. On August 22, 1853, at a curve near Conemaugh, a loaded freight train derailed after the engineer attempted an emergency brake application. The reason? He believed someone was standing on the tracks. Engineer Henry Tully survived the crash. His statement, taken while he lay injured in the Johnstown infirmary, is chilling in its consistency with Walden's account from 2 years earlier. Tully described a lone figure, motionless, facing the oncoming locomotive, long coat, pale skin height, a little taller than average. He insisted the figure did not react to the train's whistle. When investigators visited the site, they found nothing. No body, no torn clothing, not a single disturbed stone on the railbed. Initially, the incident was blamed on mistaken perception due to steam, shadow, and light reflection from wet rails. But Tully maintained his claim until his death in 1891. One element of his testimony stands out. The face looked familiar. I thought it was Walden. The name was not publicly known, yet Tully recalled it specifically. He said the man in the long coat resembled a portrait he'd once seen in the Altoona depot office. When the railroad superintendent asked why Tully recognized Walden, a man dead for 2 years, Tully replied, "Because whoever I saw had been dead for some time." The Conemaugh wreck became the second official accident linked indirectly to the mysterious figure. 3. The Night Phantom of Black Lick Creek, 1854-1855. The Black Lick Line was notorious among workers for its dense forests, where tall pines created natural tunnels of darkness. In the mid-1850s, several engineers reported seeing movement along the tracks where there should have been no one. But the most detailed account comes from Samuel Darby, a 33-year-old brakeman, whose diary was discovered in 1928 during an estate sale in Pittsburgh. His entries from the winter of 1854 describe a pattern. December 2nd. Saw a figure at the tree line, too still for a man. Clouds were heavy and the lamp flickered. January 11th. Engineer Williams braked suddenly. Said he saw someone ahead. I saw no one. February 7th. The figure was on the tracks this time. Tall, unmoving, vanished before we hit the brakes. Darby's final entry related to the sightings came on March 3rd, 1855. Williams is gone. Slipped from the engine during inspection, fell between the cars. Some say he tripped. I think his mind was on the figure. We all saw it last week. Company records confirm engineer Nathaniel Williams died in a switching accident. But Darby's implication echoes a fear common among railroad workers of the time. Whatever the figure was, it distracted the most experienced engineers at the worst possible moments. E4. The Schuylkill passenger disaster, September 1856. The Schuylkill and Susquehanna Railroad line, winding alongside the river, handled both freight and passenger service. On September 9th, 1856, a morning train leaving Reading struck what the conductor described as a human shape on the rails, causing catastrophic braking that threw 2 rear coaches off the track. 9 passengers were injured. One elderly man, Jonathan Pierce, later died from his wounds. Engineer Caleb Morris insisted he saw a person standing directly in the path of the locomotive. When asked to describe him, Morris stated, "Tall, coat down to the knees, unnaturally still. Could not see the face, though it seemed white." Rail inspectors found no body, no impact, and no evidence of collision with any object. Yet a day later, a local newspaper, the Reading Adler, published an anonymous note claiming that a figure matching this description had been seen on the river's footbridge days earlier, staring silently at passing trains. Whether coincidence or corroboration, the report contributed to growing unease among railroad men in eastern Pennsylvania. It was now commonly believed the figure did not simply appear at random. It appeared before accidents. V. The Altoona Works tragedy. April 1859. The final documented event occurred inside the massive Altoona machine shops, the industrial heart of Pennsylvania railroading. On April 6, 1859, machinist Elias Farnham was working on the frame of locomotive number 47 when he suddenly stepped backward into an active pit and fell onto a lower deck, suffering fatal injuries. What he said moments before startled every man nearby. Farnham had been staring toward the far end of the workshop, eyes wide, face pale. According to witness Jacob Rowe, Farnham whispered, "He's here, on the tracks, standing, staring at me." There were no tracks inside that section of the shop floor, only steel components and half-assembled wheel assemblies. Rowe insisted Farnham reached out his hand as if gesturing to someone visible only to him. He fell seconds later. Company officials dismissed the account as shock and imagination. But a private letter written by foreman Isaac Merrill contradicts this explanation. In a correspondence to his brother, Merrill wrote, "Whatever Elias saw, he believed it. His eyes followed something down the shop line, something none of us could see. I will not forget his expression. I fear this will not be the last of such incidents." But it was. After the Farnham accident, the sightings abruptly stopped, or at least stopped being reported. By the 1860s, rail traffic increased dramatically, crews changed, and many of the old engineers who remembered the stories had left or died in the Civil War. The legend faded, surviving only in diaries, letters, and accident reports stored in county archives. The description that never changed. Throughout the 1850s, the figure was described in nearly identical terms. Male, tall, thin, wearing a long, dark coat, standing motionless on or near the tracks, face appearing pale, never reacting to whistles, lanterns, or shouts. Several engineers insisted the figure resembled a railroad worker, possibly one who had died on the line. Speculation pointed to early fatalities from construction crews, men lost during tunnel digs, or those killed in the many small accidents never formally recorded. But the strangest suggestion came from the Conemaugh engineer, Henry Tully. The claim that the figure resembled Thomas Walden, the first man to report the apparition and the man who died shortly afterward. No official records confirm or deny this. Walden's portrait was not preserved, and company archives from that era were partially destroyed in a later fire. But some of the old letters whisper a strange thread running through these sightings. The figure appeared not merely as a ghost, but as a warning, standing on the tracks, motionless, seen moments before disaster. Afterward, a legend of the Iron Age. Historical notes from the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Allegheny Portage Line, and the Schuylkill Archives confirm 5 documented accidents and deaths between 1851 and 1859. The newspapers mention the crashes. The company logs mention the fatalities. The coroner reports mention sudden collapses, derailments, and missteps. What they do not mention, at least not officially, is the figure on the tracks. But in private letters and personal diaries, the story repeats: a silent man in a long coat, standing where no man should be, appearing before accidents, seen by those closest to their breaking point. The United States was pushing into its industrial age then. The iron rails cut through valleys where no roads had run before. Steam engines charged into landscapes untouched by machines, and many workers believed the land pushed back. Whether hallucinations caused by exhaustion, reflections of lantern light, shadows of steam, or something else entirely, the figure became one of the earliest and most persistent railroad mysteries in American history. Today, the rail lines have changed. The forests have thinned, the mountains remain, but the men who built the tracks are long gone. Yet some modern engineers working the freight lines of central Pennsylvania still report seeing shapes near the tracks at night. Most ignore them. A few slow the engine. None speak of it publicly. But if you ask around the old depots, Altoona, Galitzine, Conemaugh, some of the older workers will still repeat a version of the same warning. If you see a man in a long coat standing on the rails, slow the train. Something bad always follows. The legend of the haunted railroad tracks lives on, not because of the supernatural, but because of the men who saw something they could never explain. And in the silent corridors of Pennsylvania's forgotten railroads, the figure still stands, waiting, watching as the engines thunder past.